So guys, I just finished watching the Andor season finale on Disney Plus, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. Before we get into it, I want to say mild spoilers, okay? So if you haven't seen the show, you want to watch it. I'm not going to go into specific scenes, but I'm going to give context and just talk around the show, and I'm not going to be holding back. So this is mild spoiler warning. So if you want to still watch it and not be spoiled, then I recommend you go watch it first and then come back to this video. Now, it's kind of ironic because not long ago, I made a video about Star Wars and how I feel like the Star Wars universe is going nowhere and we're just being swamped with all those shows. And actually in that video, I said, like, I don't care about the Andor show. I don't want to see a story about Cassian Andor, a guy who only had like a short role in Rogue One. But this show caught me off guard, okay? It caught me by surprise, and I've come around on it because this is a very serious contemporary story about despair, about oppression, about ignorance, and ultimately about resistance against fascism, okay? And beyond all that, it gave us like a unique look into the Star Wars universe that we've never seen before, right? There are no Jedis, there are no lightsabers, there's no Vader. It's just a pure window into how the fascism of the Empire manifests. And it's shown in a very non-abstract, very clear-cut way, okay? There's nothing being beautified in this show. It's shown as brutal and as ruthless as it is on a small scale, right? So previously, we've seen all the, the prequels and all that, which is all like universal overarching politics that make big decisions, and Princess Amidala and Anakin and all that. So we've seen the big picture. This is showing us a small picture, a tiny window of how all this big picture stuff actually manifests on one specific planet, in one specific town, more or less. And you could really imagine watching this, that stories like that are manifesting and happening in thousands of places around the galaxy, on countless planets where the Empire is just holding these small communities in their tight grip, exploiting them and just doing god-awful things, right? So in a way, it does tell us a story about the bigger picture stuff. It does show us the ripple effect that Anakin's fate had, right? And that the Empire and what it became had on a very small scale. And I just want to kind of push this in there, right? I'm sure you remember the Duel of the Fates, right? Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn fighting Darth Maul. Imagine in that fight, Obi-Wan would have died and not Qui-Gon Jinn. And then as a result of that, Qui-Gon Jinn would have taught Anakin, and who knows if then Anakin would have actually become Vader. Spoiler. So this could have potentially changed the fate of the whole universe. Everything we've seen in Andor and how the Empire manifests in that show on the ground could have been different, could have been changed if that duel would have gone different. And that's kind of the genius of George Lucas there as well, right? Because it is called the Duel of the Fates. And it really is like shown beautifully in this show, like this idea of a butterfly effect, right? Like a small thing, a short moment could have been different, could have changed everything. Another aspect about Andor that I really enjoyed is how different it was, to me at least, tonally to what we've seen before, right? It was a little bit aligned, I guess, with Rogue One, right? It obviously same character, and it kind of feels like it plays in that sub-universe almost of Star Wars. But it was very different from the Obi-Wan show, tonally. It was quite significantly different from the Mandalorian show. So quite like Rogue One, it was like a continuation of this quite serious Star Wars universe, which doesn't have humor, right? There is no childlike lightheartedness. It was just dark and serious. And to be honest, I think that's where it gained a lot of its power, okay? Because that darkness, that link to fascism, that world that it showed links tightly to our today's world. Because after 80 years, we are kind of on the brink of allowing fascism to reign again, right? The Empire, obviously, if you look at them, their uniforms, their military hierarchy, their behavior, their totalitarian ruthlessness is clearly inspired by the Nazis, where one group of people justifies awful action because they want to maintain power, because they claim to protect certain values. They use it as an excuse because they want to uphold law and order in the name of freedom of speech. This is something that we see at the moment, where a lot of really, really concerning things happen because people say, well, it's freedom of speech. We need to be allowed to do these things, to say these things, to express these things. And obviously that's very powerful, right? Because you can always say, what do you mean I can't express? Are you against freedom of speech? Are you questioning that freedom of speech is a value that we need to uphold? And it's very, very hard to make sensible arguments against that, obviously. So now you're descending step by step in the name of freedom of speech, in the name of upholding law and order, whatever the excuse is, an excuse that you can hardly make a point against. You're slowly descending into a very, very, very dark world of oppression, right? Oppression of minorities. And that's what we see in this show. That's what this show is all about. And that's where it gains a lot of its power, because watching it, if you can count to 5, you can see the similarities. You can see things like where Donald Trump says, well, drug dealers are very, very, very bad people, and we should bring back the death penalty for all drug dealers, right? Because that's what they do in China. China's great. I hate to make this political. I really do, okay? But I can't talk around it because that's what this show talks about. That's what it's all about. It is basically a bit like a warning. It's a warning for fascism. It's a warning for the result of that slow, step-by-step descent into fascism that you hardly notice on a day-to-day basis. But if you look at it after 10 years, 15 years, you've descended into a horrible, horrible, oppressive world where suddenly people, and drawing the parallels to today's world, where suddenly people like Muslims, people like immigrants, people like black people like trans people, make it about whoever you want, okay? We can see all these tendencies where people now actually already are willing to take lives in the name of that oppression. And yeah, there will always be those voices who say, no, but this particular guy, he was just crazy. And that was an exception. And they try to marginalize it over and over again because secretly it does favor their own views as well. So step by step, you're normalizing things that were previously not normalized. And 10 years down the road, you are in a scenario that is not that different from what we've seen in Andor in this show, where people get tortured, where people get executed, where people get killed for beliefs, for different viewpoints, for looking different, behaving different, for having a different idea about how to live, for example. So it's a stark warning for fascism. That's what the show is. And ultimately, looking at it, that's what Star Wars has always been about. We've just never seen it as clear and as dark as it's been in this show. I mean, even the original trilogy is all about the rebels, right? It's about fighting the oppression of the Empire. But obviously, those films were made so many years ago that they are a bit more easygoing. It's more family entertainment. It is not as dark as Andor shows it. But again, I think one reason why Andor is showing it that clearly and in that dark vision is because of the context of the time. In the 70s and 80s, we were quite far away from, realistically a fascist regime establishing itself in the Western world, okay? It just wasn't really on the table. Now it is on the table. And I think that also inspires people who write this show to make a show that is so strong and so clearly and so dark and brutally about what is currently beginning. And if we don't pay attention, we might pay a very high price for not paying attention right now. So these are my thoughts, basically. And again, I hate to be political about this and kind of draw this into one political corner, but that's what the show is about. That's what the show is communicating and telling us. So I thought I'll share it with you guys, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And it makes me wonder, actually, right? Because I know some, for whatever reason, some conservative right-wing people are watching my videos and then they just leave very angry comments whenever I say anything against right-wing politics and so on. But I'm curious, as a right-wing conservative, you should really hate this show, okay? Because this show, if you get it, okay, if you understand what's going on, you might not be capable of that. But if you are capable of understanding context and what's currently going on, then this show shows your people in a very, very dark and unfavoring light. And you should really hate this show. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. If you're a right-leaning conservative, leave your thoughts on that show down in the comments, right? What was your viewpoint on it? Is the Empire for you a representation of the oppression of the left, right? That's just absurd. But if those are your thoughts, then of course, leave them down in the comments. I'm curious to hear them, to read them. So that's it, guys. Those were my thoughts on Andor, the first season. And I think they're starting soon on filming season 2, so I'm curious where that's gonna go. If you enjoyed the video, then I would appreciate if you leave it a like. You can also subscribe to the channel for more videos. And I hope to see you in another one. Take care of yourselves. I'm out. Bye.